shall see how that goes. Yes, I think there's going to be some hopeful things to discuss, some positive as well as, how often. I mean, I think it's a blessing in disguise for the Democrats. So go figure, as the Americans might say. But yes, we shall see how all that develops. And I'll just add here, adding this onto my blog page. Oh, so yeah, there we go. Okay, there we are. And all's done. And just wait for Warren, who should be in the next 2 or 3 minutes. So, yes. Oh dear. Just tired out. A long day. But yeah. Okay. Also, as this is a live stream discussion, I do feel free to join in. We'll be live on my YouTube page, which is Paul Bergen. Do leave some comments if you wish. It would be much appreciated. And yes, and also on my blog page, feel free to leave some comments. And yeah, hopefully add that into the discussion. I do apologise, by the way, for my long hair. This is what lockdown does, I'm afraid. It's awfully, horribly long fringe. But I hope you bear with it. But okay, let's see. And it's 4 minutes to go, and there's still no sign. But we shall see. Shall see. And yes, do let us know what you think of Trump's acquittal and where you think that's likely to go. So yes. So yeah. Okay. Hopefully, I did say 9 o'clock. Yes, I did. This is what comes of me organising these things way, way too early. But hopefully, we will be getting somewhere shortly. And yes, we'll be discussing the impeachment trial as what will happen. That will include the midterms in 2022. We'll also be discussing the results of the sort of lost my train of thought there. I do apologise. We'll be discussing the 2022 midterms. We'll be discussing the legal challenges against Trump, where the Republican Party is at the moment, where we are with Republicans in the Senate and with Congress. And I'm sure Warren will come up with some excellent comments and points that haven't even occurred to me or even occurred to you. And no doubt you will have things that will have come across in your mind that have yet to occur to Warren and me. So please, please, please do not hesitate to come forward with comments and help take part in the discussion. And we shall see how things go from there. I will move a little bit slightly over. I do apologise for that thing because I noticed there was a bit too much light there. So hopefully you can see me a lot better, and hopefully that's should be much improved. So that would be good. And just checking again to see any comments, which I'm not expecting yet, but you never know. And yes, obviously, if something's happened and Warren hasn't turned up, I mean, he's still got a minute to go. I'll have to fill in the air for about a good while and think of things to keep you entertained on the whole issue. And but I don't think it will come to that. I think it's just me coming in a bit early. And he's here, bang on time, which is good. And yes, he's just coming in now. Oh, goody. It's connecting to audio. And he's coming in any moment. Now?
Here I am.
Hello, good evening, Warren.
Good evening.
How are you this fine evening?
Oh, bearing up.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine, a bit tired. I went to bed late last night and got up early, and of course, it sort of scrambles the brain slightly, doesn't it?
I do that every night, so
yeah,
a bad lockdown habit.
yes, exactly. It's one I'm trying to break. I'm glad I'm not alone in it, though. So, Trump's been acquitted, but we kind of expected that, didn't we?
It was always on the cards. I think it's still difficult to grasp how and why so many Republican Congress people and senators didn't accept the evidence that was in front of them, the very clear evidence that Trump instigated the riot and was guilty of sedition. And I think anyone who watches SNL will have seen that just the sheer ridiculous reasoning
Yeah.
behind McConnell saying, "Well, we couldn't impeach him because he's no longer president," having said, "Well, we can't begin the Senate trial for impeachment because he's still president," only a few weeks ago. So. Yeah, they're obviously all very, very scared of the Republican base and what that's going to do to them.
It almost puts the situation in the Labour Party under Corbyn into a different sphere, doesn't it? Because this is, on one level, this does feel like there's strong similarities.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm talking to someone who also finally had enough and walked out the Labour Party, and I also have the emotional scars to and bruises like everyone else
Mm.
from my own personal experiences with that. But I get the impression that what we went through was a walk in the park compared to what some Republicans are going through.
There are some definite similarities. I mean, one of the things the Pennsylvania Republicans said to Senator Toohey today was, "We didn't elect you to go and do the right thing. We didn't elect you to go and vote your conscience. You're there to do what we tell you," and that rang a lot of bells for me. That was very similar in terms of language to some of the stuff that I heard in the Labour Party 18 months ago, 2 years ago. So it's yeah, there are some parallels there. It's a base that is out of tune with the general public. I think something like three-quarters of Republicans are still very keen on Trump, very supportive of him, according to polls today.
Yeah.
And they're the people that will turn up to those state and local Republican meetings and tell their representatives, "Look, either you get behind Trump or we kick you out," no matter what the national polling of all voters says about their views of Trump now. And he's clearly going to, well, at this stage, he's intending on running again in 2024.
Did you see the news today about Congressman let's get the surname right. Uh, Congressman Adam Kittinger.
Kitzinger. Yeah,
Yeah, I nearly always say Kissinger. That's why I'm always a little. I have to pause. But yes,
that's
Senator
going back
Kittinger.
away.
It is. He's still
Mm,
with us as well, which is.
yeah,
But
amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was 11 members of his own family
yeah,
said, I wrote it down here. Um, you're a member of the Devil's Army,
yeah,
which is extraordinary language
yeah,
for family members. I mean, we all expect that kind of extremism sort of on the internet from trolls, but a written letter from 11 members of his own family just shows how deep and how serious this kind of cult mentality goes. And again, it's sort of redolent of some of the stuff in the Labour Party about, there is no questioning of the leader. You can't question the leader publicly or privately.
yes. I mean, did you notice? I mean, it was one of his cousin, and she didn't just write the. She got the signatures. This cousin organised it, and she didn't just send it. She sent it to his father to make sure he got, you know, that the representative got it, and then she sent it to all the local Republicans in Illinois and the news outlets. As she put it, she wanted to make sure he was shunned.
Mm.
Um, what she, of course, she doesn't realise in the process is she scarred her name across, well, internationally,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
is, yeah,
You've got to feel for him.
yeah,
It's painful enough to lose your political family, but to lose your actual family, we've all seen that happen over things like Brexit
yeah,
and Corbynism. But yeah, that's got to be tough. And he said himself, he knew what he was doing. He knew what the consequences would be,
mm,
but it was the right thing to do. And that's what's got to be done in politics sometimes.
yes.
Um,
Did you, what was I going to say? Do you think there'll be much damage done to the Republican base as a result of all this? Because they've lost quite a large number of registered Republican voters since January the 6th, haven't they?
yeah,
Mm.
a lot going independent,
Yeah,
a few turning to the Democrats. I mean, that's obviously something that doesn't have parallels over here, um, where where you have this sort of interim thing between being a non-aligned voter and then you become a registered supporter of a party, and then you become a member of a party. And both in terms of membership and registered voters, in some states at least, yeah, they're shedding a lot of members. So obviously that is going to leave the sort of MAGA hat wearing extremists in a bigger majority in terms of who decides who Republican candidates are for 2021, 22.
yeah,
And beyond. So again, there's parallels with the Labour Party, where the priority is to drive people out so that you have more control over the base.
yes. So, do you think the Republicans will split?
Apparently, I was reading that there was a meeting of sort of moderate Republicans at sort of state elected level, and some from Congress as well, and some of them were talking about a split, but the majority said no, now's not the time. We need to carry on. Again, I think there's some real comparisons with the Parliamentary Labour Party 2 years ago, in terms of, do you stay and fight, or do you look at creating an alternative? Um, I don't know what will happen. I think it may be that the Trump supporters split the party by deselecting, by primarying some of these incumbents. It may be that something else emerges. It certainly doesn't look like Trump's going to form his own party at this point. Why would you, when that state and national structure is already there? Just take it over and use it.
Yeah,
Um, but it has certainly huge implications for the midterms in 2022 in terms of, will the Republicans be divided? Will they be buoyed up by the sort of Trump support? will Biden's policies have had enough time to work and to provide fruit and to get people on side? It's going to be a fascinating set of midterms.
Yes. What do you think will happen as things stand at the moment?
Um, I worry that the Marjorie Taylor Greens will take over the QAnon, the Trump loyalists. They will be the ones that will win in state primaries in the way that we saw them win selection for Labour over here, the Corbynites. Uh, yeah, it all depends, I think, then on how things stack up. Things are equally polarized. Will the Republicans offset their losses? People who are horrified at what the Republican Party has done in exonerating Trump, or will things divide along partisan lines still, and it'll be as close as it was in previous elections? It's very hard to predict at this point.
But of course, then there's the other issue, isn't there, of when you look at New York with, because Trump's facing several legal challenges there.
Mm,
Not only that, he's also facing potential criminal charges from the state of Georgia,
mm.
as incidentally is Lindsey Graham.
Yes, yeah. There's a huge number of lawsuits against Trump, his family, his businesses, his lawyers. I saw earlier on that he's being sued along with Rudy Giuliani by one of the Democrat members of Congress under a very old Ku Klux Klan law that was passed after the Civil War for citing insurrection. There's still talk about using the 14th Amendment, is it, or the 12th Amendment against him?
14.
Uh, 14th, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, will that take him out of play? Will that make him more of a martyr
Yeah.
and make his supporters even more keen to avenge him? That's another factor.
Yeah.
It's hard to see. I mean, as I've said before, my view is that every means of the law should be used against Trump and his supporters
Yes.
for crimes for things that happened during the insurrection on January the 6th. The rule of law has got to be upheld, and I think the Department of Justice have got to look at making some of those organisations like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers um, domestic terrorist organizations and using the weight of law against them. Otherwise, I think we'll see again what happened on the 6th, what was planned to happen in Michigan against the governor there. We're going to see that again. And worryingly, I think we will see some legislators get shot.
Do you think that what happened on the 6th has turned beyond the Republican base? Do you think that's fully turned people against Trump?
I think it has turned some people against him. It's fired some other people up. Obviously, there's been some people featured on the US networks who've said now that Trump hasn't sort of miraculously been sworn in for a second term, as the QAnon loyalists said, they're beginning to see, or they have seen, the sort of truth and the reality behind all of those conspiracy theories. Equally, you think that there's possibly some others that have been drawn into it. So I guess without that sort of social media platform that he had before, I don't know how Trump can motivate it again. But of course, it may not be Trump. It may be someone who is a little more savvy and clever and devious, who takes up the Trump mantle and uses the kind of methods that he's used to go for that part of the base. So even if Trump is taken out by conviction or lawsuits or whatever, then there may be someone else ready to step in. Would they have the charisma of Trump? That's hard to say, but he certainly created a base that can be used either by him, someone from his family, or someone else.
Mm. Do you think where's the hope?
I think the hope is that Biden and Harris have a successful first year, that the recovery from the pandemic, both in terms of getting the vaccine out and the economic recovery on the back of their stimulus package, bears fruit. I think if some of that legal action, whether it's DOJ or state district attorneys and people, taking whatever action is against the Trump base, that's successful and that takes a lot of people out. And the fact that Trump isn't on Twitter anymore, maybe it fades, and maybe, more of the kind of Romney wing of the Republicans start winning back control of Republican bases, and we're back to more of a kind of normal. Whether that genie can be put back in the bottle, I'm not sure. But I think it needs some independent, tough legal action against Trump, and it needs the Democrats to hold it together, have some successful policy initiatives, see those $2,000 checks land with people, and make sure they keep some of those independents on board.
Mm. And the Republicans, can you see any hope within that party?
Hmm. There was a point where I couldn't see any hope for the Labour Party, and things turned around there. It's
Mm.
a slightly different circumstance, and obviously it's not sort of one unified party as it is over here. It's 50 state parties that may have different dynamics in depending on the kind of state they are electorally, how strong the Democrats are. So it may be that some of them are lost entirely to the red cap wearing extremists, and others may go more moderate, and you may see quite a broad church party there. But as I say, I think the likelihood is, in the short term at least, that the Trump supporters are going to purge some of the more moderate members, certainly the ones that voted to impeach.
Mm. There was a talk I read made a point of reading an interview in the New York Times with today with Congressman Adam Kitzinger, where he said that he was asked, "Are you planning on leaving the Republican Party?" And I recognised the feeling behind some of the language from being in the Labour Party, which was, "I don't want to. I want to stay and fight." But he says, "I will have a clearer idea this summertime."
Mm,
By the end of summer, he will know whether to stay or to form a new party.
mm. I think the States is one of the few places that's like Britain in terms of the two-party system is very, very well ingrained, and it's very hard to see anyone breaking through on that. It's hard to see whether a Republican splinter party taking on the mantle of the Republican Party previously, and whilst the Trump supporters keep ownership of the brand, so to speak, that becomes more marginalized. It's like over here, that system has been in place since the 1900s, broadly. So it's a very tough thing to shift.
But you could also put forward the argument that whilst the third party won't necessarily break through, it can influence the two main parties. I mean,
Mm,
there is a debate in the school of thought about how relatively successful the SDP were. Did the SDP help or hinder the Labour Party? I used
mm,
to argue it hindered the Labour Party, but since I've walked out of the Labour Party, I and seen firsthand how it can be, I can see an argument for saying the SDP probably helped create a situation which shocked the Labour Party into being moderates. And
mm.
now I may be wrong in that. I don't entirely hold it, but it's one I'm a bit more sympathetic towards. But I'm wondering whether you could argue the same in the US.
Well, the topic of my university dissertation was, did the SDP pull the Labour Party back towards the centre? And I wrote it from a perspective of having been involved in the SDP
Yes.
during the late 80s, quite centrally as the national secretary of their student wing. So yeah, I would argue that if you've got something, if you've got a potentially viable party towards the center that's drawing votes away from you, Obviously, that's going to have a gravitational pull. I think you can look at it the other way in terms of, we wouldn't have had a referendum on Brexit if David Cameron hadn't had Nigel Farage and UKIP exercising that gravitational pull, drawing voters away from Conservatives on the right. So yeah, obviously it is that split vote. So whilst a splinter Republican Party may not supplant the Trump Republican Party in the midterms, it could draw enough support away from them to allow the Democrats to win some seats where they might not otherwise win. And obviously in a situation where both the House and the Senate are almost 50-50,
Mm.
those elections are crucial.
Yes. What do you make of the four horsemen of the Senate? The Senate to well, I tend to nickname them the four horsemen of the Senate apocalypse: Graham, Cruz, Rubio, and Senator Ramport. In fact, no, you can include McConnell, so it's not really the four.
Mm.
Would you say they've single-handedly or done immense damage to the Republican Party?
Um, I think it's probably worse than that. I mean,
Yeah,
amongst them, there were people who were vociferous opponents of Trump
yeah.
back in 2015, 2016, and they have become, the most loyal, the most slavish um, defenders of Trump. I don't know how they square those positions. I don't know how some of the way that Trump treated them and their families publicly, I think it is just pure naked self-interest in terms of, take Cruz for
Graham?
example.
Oh, yeah.
He's in Texas. Texas is a fully red Republican state party. They made advances there. He wants to keep his Senate seat against a primary. He has eyes on the nomination if Trump doesn't make it. He wants all of those red cap wearing supporters to turn out for him. So yeah, he's entirely prepared to swallow his principles, swallow his pride, and go after those votes.
You wonder how short, long-sighted they are because they don't. It's as if they don't realise potential Democrat switchers and members of the public aren't watching them. I
Mm,
mean, Senator Ted Cruz was someone who Trump made allegations, spurious allegations about his father in the Kennedy assassination. He insulted Cruz's wife. Cruz was justifiably publicly and I imagine privately angry about that. And then he supports Trump.
mm.
And I don't know how he squares that and how his family square that, quite frankly.
It's just self-interest.
Yeah.
I think it's you can't compartmentalize it. You say I'm going to go along with it because it's in the good of the party. It's in the good of defeating the evil enemy, which they see as the Democrats.
Mm.
As people went along with Corbyn here, and turned a blind eye to some of the more extreme stuff, the anti-Semitism, and said, well, for the greater good, we've got to beat the Conservatives, we've got to stick with it. Corbyn won't be around forever, and we can have our turn after he's gone. So I think there's an element of that in what Cruz is doing and the others.
But I find, and I imagine a lot of the public are more angry about those people in some respects than they are about the actual, because as offensive as Trump supporters are, and as offensive as Corbyn supporters are, at least the hardcore among them genuinely believe what they're believing, as
Mm,
offensive as it is, and as much as they need to be kept well away for very good reason from the levers of power. And yet these people are so opportunistic, you feel you can never ever trust them.
mm. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there are some people in the Labour Party
Yeah.
who I have huge respect for sticking with it, and there are people who I have a lot less respect for going along with it and for actively supporting and turning a blind eye to some of the more unfortunate activities of the Corbynistas. So yeah, it's horribly unprincipled, horribly self-interested. But of course, they are playing to an audience that only gets its news from Fox, from OAN, from Breitbart, from a lot of these
Yeah.
conservative media outlets. The people they're appealing to don't watch CNN. They don't watch the mainstream networks. Trump has fully turned them off those if they were watching it before. So they are not going to criticize Cruz and Rubio and others. Although they have criticised McConnell because bizarrely he voted to acquit and then turned on Trump quite vociferously. I think trying to play both sides, um, which makes me question exactly how clever he is.
I think McConnell strikes me as someone who is so tied to the Republican Party above everything else. You can't see the wood for the trees, which again, it makes me look at Cruz and Greb. I think that the thing that gets me about them, aside from the opportunism, is I find them incredibly short-sighted.
Mm,
It's they're looking at their own base and how to reconcile the divides in their base without accounting for intelligence in others and without accounting for the voters who can see what they're doing. In fact,
mm,
the thing that struck me is if I were a senator or congressman, there would now be, I would feel slightly depressed in that there would be very, very few Republicans who I could trust on any bipartisan issue.
mm.
And that's a
Yeah,
very dangerous place to be.
I think that's I had hoped that McConnell might in recognizing Joe Biden's huge experience in the U.S. Senate and being a creature of the Senate like Joe Biden is, that there would be scope for bipartisanship there. But I think how he's operated over the last 5 to 10 years, particularly when you think back to how he treated Obama
Yeah.
and what he did with his Supreme Court nominees, and how he's been particularly craven under Trump's presidency. But he's had his objectives, getting as many conservative judges on the
Supreme
federal,
Court.
district,
Yeah.
Supreme Courts. Yeah, which he's managed to achieve. He has his eye on his legacy rather than on the White House. So he's a little different in terms of compared to Rubio or Cruz or the others.
Where do you think the Republicans could learn from the Labour Party in terms of getting towards post-Trump?
Um, the thing is, they haven't lost as badly as the Labour Party
Yeah.
did. I mean, as much as people try and rewrite history with, oh well, the percentage that Labour got in 2017 was this, and you know, the the performance of the Labour Party in 2019 was that. They were terrible defeats. The first against the weakest Conservative campaign and leader in living memory. The second, the worst defeat Labour had had since the 1930s. The problem in America is that Trump got more votes than any Republican candidate ever, and did a lot better, I think, than many people predicted. Obviously, the overall result in the end was not even close in terms of the public vote. It was a decent win, the same size win he had in 2016 in terms of the Electoral College. So the Republicans and the Trump supporters can look at that and say, well, look, we lost. Well, a lot of them don't believe they lost at all, but they lost, but they didn't lose badly. You can't look at the 2019 general election and not say that Labour didn't lose extremely badly and need to do something to address that, i.e., a change of leadership and a change back to a more moderate party with a broader appeal. I think there's a lot of Republicans that will say, look, we did better in this state and that state and the other state. And we came pretty close to holding on to places like Georgia, which of course, is their equivalent of our red wall. It should have stayed Republican in under any circumstance. So they can make a case, and obviously with a sympathetic media, they've got a winning audience.
Yes. So I mean, it does kind of go back to that idea that if the Republicans are going to change for the better, They need to be badly defeated in 2022 and possibly 2024.
Mm.
Because if they don't, they're not going to change.
Let's hope so.
Yes.
Yeah, let's hope that they do suffer that kind of bad defeat, and then turn to someone like a Mitt Romney or an Adam Kitzinger. But the fear is that they will be kicked out before then. It's very hard to make a sitting senator or congressman resign.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know when their terms are up, and when they're due for primaries.
Well, there is that, and there's also there is possible. I mean, if I don't know enough about this, and I did ask a number of American acquaintances to be on this live stream, and a lot of them were busy or unable to take part, or whatever reason, and so, and they would have known more of this. But Lindsey Graham's been chased by the Georgia state
Hmm.
over his contribution. If he is found as guilty as anything, and he's legally found as guilty as anything, does he have to resign as senator? He doesn't, does he?
Hmm. Um, Obviously, there are in the UK Parliament there are circumstances under
Yeah,
which people are forced to resign under certain criminal charges, but surprisingly not all. So I would imagine it's somewhat similar over there. There are probably some criminal charges that are survivable and some that are not.
yeah,
I mean, there were a lot of questions asked about his defeat of Jamie Harrison, when that really did look like it was in the bag for the Democrats. But
yeah,
whether that's part of the legal action against him, I'm not sure. But it is more like you say about the his attempts to meddle in Georgia.
yes. We shall see. We shall
Hmm.
see. Anyway, I think we've chewed enough of the fat over this for about and half an hour is gone. So I mean, it's always going to be fairly short, this one.
Yeah.
But thank you for your contribution, and hopefully, uh, in 2 years' time, it will be a far more positive story.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's hope so.
Yes. Well, it's
Okay.
all right. Cicero said, "Whilst there's life, there's hope." And
Absolutely.
for those watching, if you're interested in Lord of the Rings, tomorrow night, Malcolm Mann and I will be discussing the 20th anniversary of the Fellowship of the Ring at 7 p.m. Okay, thank you.